Hello, everyone. Welcome to our fourth speaker series in 2021. My name is Christoph Lüttger. I'm a professor of business ethics at the Technical University of Munich and director of the Institute for Ethics in Artificial Intelligence. With its speaker series, the TUM Institute for Ethics in AI invites experts from all over the world to talk about ethics and governance of AI. These events serve as an important platform for sharing new research and exchanging knowledge. Since our launch in 2019, we were already able to run 13 such speaker series events. Because of these virtual events in particular, we were able to reach an even broader audience from around the globe. So now we are looking forward to hearing from you today during our discussion. Distinguished guest speaker Professor Zeng is professor at the Institute of Automation, Chinese Academy of Sciences, and he serves as a deputy director of the Research Center of Brain-Inspired Intelligence, as well as co-director of the China-UK Research Center for AI Ethics and Governance. He's the founding director of the Research Center for AI Ethics and Sustainable Development at the Beijing Academy of Artificial Intelligence. Besides that, he's also a chief scientist for AI ethics and governance at the Institute of AI International Governance of Tsinghua University, which is, I would like to mention, a key strategic partner for the Technical University of Munich. And I'm happy to say that I'm also have been appointed to this academic board of this institute. Besides that, Professor Zeng is an associate fellow at the Leverhulme Center for the Future of Intelligence, University of Cambridge, and an expert in the UNESCO ad hoc group on AI ethics. He has led the effort on drafting and grounding the Beijing AI principles, the AI for Children Beijing principles, and is also one of the main drafters of the national governance principles for the new generation artificial intelligence. Today, he will talk about near-term and long-term challenges for creating ethical AI. So before we begin, I would like to ask you to turn off your microphones and camera during the session and submit your questions either via chat or raise your hand. We will try to answer as many questions as possible. Also, let us know in the chat if you are experiencing technical difficulties. Yi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Christoph. I'm going to share my screen first. So can you see the slide?
Yes.
Okay, can you see changing of the slides? Okay, great. Thank you to the Institute and also, of course, to Christoph for inviting me to this speaker series. I'm very honored. And also, I'm very grateful that starting with the very beginning, when Christoph initiated the Global AI Ethics Consortium, it's been inviting me to be one of the founding members to start everything and together and to make the effort. I think, to me, I think it's been an extraordinary experience where we're having a most inclusive way of starting a AI ethics initiative where which I think everybody should be involved in many ways in the future, and we're very grateful for the interactions. I think for today I'm not going to talk that much about what I have done for the Beijing AI principles and other principles that I'm involved. I wanted to draw our attention from near-term to long-term ethical challenges, which may help us to have a more long-term strategic view to doing AI ethics research and to solve the problems for the near term and get very much prepared for the long term. So I hope that will help us to move things forward. So for the near term, I wanted to start the discussion as a technical researcher, and then to see why I say that, of course, there are efforts which emphasize on the importance of privacy protection. They're all there for those principles. Most of them mention this in a very clear way. But why, as a technical researcher, I was so worried about whether technology could enable us to protect ourselves. So that's the starting point for today. To me, the answer is simply no. We're not ready to protect ourselves by using the current AI technology. So I will give you a few examples. Why not? So, for example, in many places in the world, you see that ban the use of facial recognition is happening. Well, I see that does not really solve the problem, because potential similar issues actually are the same for many other biometric recognition technologies. So, for example, when the general audience is more familiar with facial recognition and the policymakers said that, well, people don't like it, it has a lot of issues, so how about ban the use of it? Well, of course, you could do it. And then they talk to those technical giants, companies. They don't like it, but if you're going to have a policy saying, yeah, we're going to ban it, so they can do nothing about it. Well, on the other hand, to me, if I were those tech giants, I don't work for any of them, but if I were them, I would not be so worried, because there were many alternative technologies that can be compared to facial recognition. For example, iris recognition, gait recognition, vocal pattern recognition, and there are a lot many that you can use to replace the facial recognition. Well, on the other hand, the risk right there is pretty much the same for privacy violations, gender biases, and racial biases. They're all there. So this is all true for other biometric recognition technologies. For example, if you're using, let's say, iris recognition, compared to male, there will be 10% drop for female. This is all true for both facial recognition and iris recognition, and also for gait recognition. So this is why I said I'm so worried that when ban the use of single biometric recognition is not that effective. When those giants said, well, yeah, well, the true story is they're getting prepared to use alternatives. Well, but nobody is talking about it. So this is why I feel really, really terrible. My second example is on data revocation. There's one time when I was talked to a CEO of tech giants worldwide, so-called by themselves. They say that, oh, we're truly international, and we have branches in Europe, so we are 100% comply with GDPR. To me, I was like, well, no one is really 100% comply with GDPR. For example, talking about data revocation, where people need it when they're not happy, they want to revoke their data. And then the company said, yeah, we did that. And then I was asking, in the database or in the AI model, they say, oh, of course, in the database, if the user is not happy, the data will be deleted from our database. That means we're not using it in our service. Well, the question is, in the AI era, actually the data has been used when training the AI model, and the features, characteristics of a single user has been learned by the AI model. If you want to remove the user data from the AI model, but now it's not technically possible. So people choose, there's only one way you can do it now. That is to retrain the AI model. For example, the deep learning model. Or for example, for the GPT model based on neural networks, training GPT will cost $5 million a time. So what people do? People choose not to retrain the model until they have to. So in this case, when you say, I want to revoke my data, what's really happening is, hopefully, they could delete your data from their database as you wish. Time or even half a year time. That's the problem. Your data is not deleted. They're still there in the AI model. That's why I said data revocation are currently not technically possible. My third example is on federated learning. Federated learning said that, oh, if the data is owned by one company, well, they want to train a much bigger AI model. So they ask the data from other companies. Then they say, no, we're not giving you our data. It's private. It's private to our users. It's private. It's our, it's our data. Well, federated learning said that you don't really have to share your data. You share a data model. You train yourself, and then you share your model to me, AI model to me, and then your model will be combined with my AI model to do the retraining to get a much bigger model. And then I can share our bigger model to you, which use your model, well, doesn't really use your data directly. It seems fascinating because now you don't really have to share users' data directly to other people. Well, on the other hand, you get benefits because they share their AI model with your data characteristics and theirs. Well, on the other hand, actually, you just forgot that when sharing your AI model, the characteristics of those user data has been shared to other company. Well, you never told your user that you will share your data characteristics and patterns. So there are no informed consent to users that you're sharing your AI model based on their data to other companies, which as a user myself will not agree. So federated learning keeps the user data privately, while on the other hand, it violates with informed consent. So that's the real story. But those who are doing federated learning, they say that we're protecting your data by using federated learning, but they never told you that it violates with your consent. My last example on this is differential privacy, which is the technology that you can use actually to protect your data in the database. Well, on the other hand, it's not really effective in AI models. When you introduce differential privacy to your AI models, actually, yes, the data can be protected. Well, on the other hand, the efficiency and accuracy of the AI models, let's say accuracy for recognition or machine learning, will drop dramatically. On the other, that is to say, in the real world of AI, if the companies would like to keep the efficiency and accuracy of their AI services, they're not using differential privacy to protect your data. So that's the real case. And it's not technically effective use that to protect your data for now. So think about the scenario: who's using differential privacy to protect your data when their AI models the accuracy need to drop from 99% to 70? No one will use that. So that is the real concern. Like I said, by using these 4 examples, I think I'm gonna conclude that as a technical researcher for now, there are 2 things. One is that I'm really, really negative to say that the current technology is not ready to protect us. Or the second thing that I would like to say is, as a technical researcher, we have to take the responsibilities to move things forward. By these 4 examples, all of them, we don't have a solution for now, though we're trying in my lab on the way. Hopefully could be shared maybe in the next talk in this series, hopefully. So let's talk a little bit further. That is the current situation for now we have. So when I talk these ideas to some social science researchers, they say, oh, how can we get the society aware of this situation? And then I said, no, it's not only about the society, it's really about, we need to get informed of the technical researchers about the situation and push them, or including myself, to move things forward. A little bit longer for the next generation. As Christoph mentioned on the AI principles, Beijing principles on AI for children. So why children? When we released the principles, the MIT Technology Review is like, why kids need special protection? To me, it's like, it's far, for the expression, let's say for the expression of will, they're far away from adults. In many cases, they don't have the willingness to express themselves in front of adults, in front of AI services. But it does not mean AI is now ready to protect them. On the other hand, many decisions has been made by their parents. Well, the parents themselves is not ready to make the decisions. For example, when you post the pictures of your children to Facebook, so did they really agree? Well, they say, oh, Dad, that's so awkward. It's like 20 years later. And then they will say, how could you do this to me? That could happen. And you will be like, oh, I never know that your facial data will be used to attack your bank account 20 years later. So that's why I said that although parents, they're still not ready. So this is why children they're the most vulnerable groups in the world, and they need extra efforts to protect them, especially in the AI era. Just give one of the example is emotion recognition in the classroom. It was designed to actually to see whether the students are focused or not. The motivation seems with reasons, but this is one of the most horrible design that I could imagine. Thinking about the, I'm giving you one of the examples from Beijing in the left top. Well, of course, it happens everywhere. It's in Europe and also in the United States. But let's say, can the students really be understood by analyzing points and relations on their faces, whether they're focused? No, not. The current facial recognition recognize people, whether people are focused by using the relationships among those points. Well, on the other hand, the teachers are changing or fundamentally changing their ways interacting with those students. So they look at the mirrors, not the students. Well, what can the students do now? Oh, I could pretend to be focused, right? And then for some of them, what they're trying, like on the right bottom, you see that they say, oh, I could figure out how to cheat the AI model, not to detect me. So they actually to stick something on their face where they found the limitations of the pattern recognizers. And then by that, actually the pattern recognition technology is not useful anymore. In Japan, people discovered a certain type of glasses. When you wear it, then your faces will be hidden for the data analysis. So you see that there are technologies going against this kind of recognition in the classroom. A week later, when they released the services, the Ministry of Education said that don't do it. So it disappeared. Well, people never learned a lesson. 2 months later, in Carnegie Mellon, somebody said that, oh, well, it's not only about emotion recognition. We can know in which position you are and what you do in the classroom by using gait recognition. That's even a even worse disaster to the next generation, I would say, because in this case they're not moving anymore in the classroom. So you see, to me, it's like, oh, my 5-year-old girl. But now, when starting with the kindergarten, I found the cameras in the class. Although it's not for emotion recognition, it's for safety. Well, you could say later, like 15 years later, and then she would say, "Oh, Dad, I'm going to college. Any suggestions?" To me, I'm still crazy about AI in a positive way to create more ethical AI for future society. My girl could say, "Oh, no, Dad, not for me, because this technology has been spying on me for more than 15 years. And now you wanted me to learn as a profession? No, not for me." So that's the long-term impact that I'm talking about to the next generation. They will fundamentally hate, or at least have very negative idea for creating AI for the society. As we could name a lot more examples like this, and this is why I feel that why we need to be really careful for using AI to the next generation. Well, does it mean you cannot use AI in school? Probably not. The answer is yeah, you could in some way, because thinking about campus bullying, where actually hurts many students. So this is one of the examples from Japan. Like 2 years ago, they wanted to use facial pattern recognition to trace bullying. So how can we have a better design here? The design could be that, for now in my lab, we're doing a version of it, although I don't see any similar tries, but my idea would be that in normal cases, people just move in a normal way, where the AI model could detect that, oh, this is normal scenario where you don't have to track everyone, you don't have to record the data. And on the other hand, when something abnormal happened and the detector actually detect this kind of abnormal behavior, and then it was activated to sense the concrete data, to do the recognition of these booleans and to warn those securities. In that case, you're protecting the user privacy in normal cases, while on the abnormal event, like booleans, they have to be activated to do something useful. By that, I would say that's a more careful design, which should be beneficial. This is why we had the AI for Children working group, working with the industry here, and also with scholars. Hopefully, we could have more careful design for each of the AI services for children. So second, I'm going to talk about AI for biodiversity, where actually I feel one case is really horrible to me is that during the big fire in Australia, there are 3 billion animals that has been killed during the disaster. So AI has been claimed to be very powerful these days, but you never see anything using AI to protect these wild animals. Let's say to use drones or driverless cars to find them and to help them in some way. No single try that I found. So this is the so-called enabling technology for the society. So this is the most horrible picture that I could find, which shocked me in many ways. I'm just thinking that the technology really bring his or her life. I think no, the fire. No, I think yes, because the fire may not take their lives, because when there are no these iron springs, they could have a way to go out of these areas. So the technology itself really take away her life or his life. But it seems that we can do a lot more by using AI to help to protect the biodiversity. For example, you can use pattern recognition to actually trace the health status of wild animals. You could also do the counting in a large area, whether they're in a good status in every season. You could also found the attacks to important animals that you wanted to protect, and many other ways to use them. So I hope that we're moving things forward. Then I'm going to talk about AI for cultures, and then and civilizations. Maybe you will have a question saying, is this related to AI ethics? My answer is, ethics is always talking about what we should and shouldn't do. In the discussion of AI ethics, we always are talking about what we shouldn't do, what is incorrect. But on the other hand, we found that there are not so much trying saying where we should bring AI to change the society and to make it more sustainable. So this is why also in the Chinese national governance principles of new AI, why we write that AI is an enabling technology that to power sustainable development. So in this case, you know why I'm talking about AI for culture and civilization. So it's of course very cool to have neural network that can generate art. But did you see that at the right, that those neural networks actually just create bizarre inceptionism art, where they put many animal faces in a weird way in the sky and also in those buildings? I'm asking, what does it mean? What you want to tell people by this way. I mean, for these two artistic work, they're world famous. They tell many stories about artists themselves, their lives, and the way we see our lives. But for these two conversions, I didn't, or regenerations, I didn't see any additions. On the left side is by my girl. I could not say it's artistic work, but it shows ideas. So I was asking my girl, what does it mean for these fancy fruits? She was like, I would call it what if fruits are with lives. So you see that the meaning of life has been represented in this picture, but by her own way. For the next one, it's about butterflies. So I was asking why they're different. And my girl was like, oh, I never thought the butterfly could be way different, but I thought human could be thin, could be overweighted, just like you have a big stomach. To try to understand the nature with different, styles that understand that represent the diversity of the nature. I think that's cool. So you see, the current AI tells us what cannot be done by AI for artistic work. So that's the only lesson I could learn from those neural network models. Talking about cultures, I'm going to share one of the examples when we were drafting the UNESCO AI ethical recommendation. I was talking about living harmony, where harmony means harmony among self, family, and governments in ancient China. Now, it also means harmony among different races and countries in a more modern age. We also talk about harmony between human and environment for now. And for the very future, I would say the harmony between human and AI. So my Japanese colleague was like, oh, the harmony has been deeply rooted into Japanese philosophy. In our language, why it means living harmony. It implies a peaceful unity and conformity with a social group in which members prefer to the continuation of a harmonious community over their personal interests. So I would think, oh, cool, of course, that's similar ideas. And my African colleague was like, maybe you're wrong, because in our Ubuntu, this is so African philosophy. It may start with from African. I was like, oh, I don't care where it starts, but it seems that we share the spirits. So you see that harmony, and then in Japanese wa or in Ubuntu, they use very different terms, but people never know that they have the same meaning when you're only familiar with your own cultures. AI could be used as an enabling technology to find these similarities and connect them together. In which way we're connecting them? So for example, we're developing a cultural interaction engine where my colleague at UNESCO expert group, they say that we need AI to enable cultural heritage. I was like, oh, that was 20 years ago when you can use AI to do the cultural heritage. Of course you can do it, but for now, what we need is not only heritage, but also interactions. In which way we're enabling the interactions? For example, when we like the Forbidden City. You've been there for several times, so like the buildings, decorations, and the cultures right there, starting from ancient China. Well, for Japanese, they like the Horuji Temple in Japan because it's really founded, years ago. And then what is the commonalities? Maybe some of the Japanese don't really getting aware of the Forbidden City, but they're all buildings by Asian empires. They're all with Buddha halls. They're all with old wooden materials to make the buildings. So that is discovery based on natural language processing and knowledge representation and semantic web that connects these knowledge together when you compare these two world heritage. By that, I think we'll share many mutual understandings on cultures that connects people from different geolocations. For some of you, you may know that we're creating the AI for SVG Corporation network. That we wanted to really to bring all the experts and non-experts together to enable a open development of AI and sharing the infrastructures of AI and sharing those best practices in SDGs. And hopefully these kind of trends could bring us forward. One additional example I would like to share is something which shocked me, that when we analyze all the AI and computer science related papers in, we found there were more than 8,000 of, 8 million of them, were only less than 1.1 of them are directly related to AI for SVGs. So that means no one really care about that in the AI technical world for now. For those topics, the AI for healthcare and AI for education is bigger. Of course, you can make money from it. But for the rest, AI for biodiversity, hardly no one is working on it. So that is why I feel horrible that when people are talking about SVGs, they're trying to use SVGs to find a future for money, but not to really to push forward a sustainable world. And we urge our AI scientists to move things forward. Then I'm going to talk about the long term. In China, AI is considered to be in between of tools and partners, while in Japan, it's more of a partners. While in sci-fi, it's always been enemies to the humanity. So, and also in most Western countries, it's more of a tool. For the very future, I would say is really the partner or not, or an enemy. It's really depending on in which way we're going for long-term AI and AGI. And to me, of course, everyone understands that narrow AI is working on single or few cognitive functions, where general AI is talking about every aspect of cognition to be simulated. Well, super intelligence means every aspect of human intelligence could, the machine could go beyond every aspect. But to me, I think it's not the right way to talk about it, because maybe we don't need true AGI. For example, humans are not perfect. We have approximately 70 different emotions. Many of them are negative. So thinking about creating negative emotions to AI, that could be the end of the world. That's why I feel that we don't need true AGI, but what we need is really ethical AI for the human good and ecology. In that case, how could we move things forward when we are talking about advanced AI? So by advanced AI, I'm actually, I think the starting point should be AI with self-awareness. When AI could perceive themselves, and then to move to AI with cognitive empathy. That means AI could infer what you're thinking about based on their own experience, and to understand other people by using their own experience, so that they take care of other people. And also, I think that the future is really on AI with positive emotional empathy, which is of course a must to the future society if we really want AI to be with understanding. So why starting with the self? It's really about, I think, therefore I am, where you cannot say you think, therefore you are, because you're in my perceptual bubble. So when people are talking about can machine think, if it's without a perspective of the self, the sense of self, I never thought we could have a thinking machine. So the machine is processing information, but it's not thinking, because for now, they're without a sense of self. I don't really have the time to talk about self-consciousness and how we develop a machine. My colleagues work on we're capturing the mechanisms and structures of the monkey brain to enable the robots to be with the ability of passing mirror test. But I'm quite sure that the machine themselves are not with self-consciousness for now, but it is with a very initial level of self-perception, I would say. That is the basis. So maybe you think, oh, AI could be too risky with the sense of self. But to me, I think AI without a self is the most dangerous approach to AI. Because when you don't have self-recognition, motivations, values, distinguish yourself from others and seeing others as agents like you don't have empathy for others. I don't think that's safer. I think for these characteristics, it keeps AI much safer instead of not safe. In the interest of time, I'm giving you the examples directly, saying that here is a green dot exploring the environment and finding that, oh, I cannot go to the blue one, that's water, that could kill myself. So I'm going to my destination in the white box. So it's learning. Well, in this, at the bottom, you see that there's a red ball moving. Well, they're moving together. But when the green one is moving to the destination, you see that actually the red ball doesn't really have a choice to go downstairs. It has to go up or left or right, but all of them are going to push the red ball into the water. So in this case, actually, on the right side, you see another AI model, which actually find an alternative way to get to the destination and he's trying to avoid do negative side effect to the red one, to give the red one an opportunity to move downstairs so that she could still keep alive. This is not by reinforcement learning. This is by cognitive empathy, building on top of the self-recognition model that we have. So because the green one has the experience to go into the water, so it will say, oh, what if I were there, I were pushed to have no choice, and then I will be game over. So he found an alternative way not doing it, because it's still also with a mirror recognition, a mirror system that help them to use theory of mind or cognitive empathy to behave, avoiding negative side effects. That is, I would say, that is a more empathetic AI that we're creating for the future, which should be a little bit ready for the future of the society. We also need to think about the transformation. We start with the quest of intelligence from two sides, machine and human. For machine, we're doing humanization, and for the human, we're doing mechanization to extend our intelligence. For the other side, we're doing creating intelligence from the bottom up. Well, the future is really the super intelligent, conscious living becoming, I would say, a new form of life. And the philosophical questions will be really different. Whereas for the machine, you're asking who they are. For ourselves, when we extend ourselves, we're always asking, am I still myself? But the new question is who the new we will be. I'm doing Brains by the AI. I see the ultimate destination is to create a Brains by the AI to be more human than human. What does it mean? So these are each bot. So that means give me a ride when using these fingers. And then you see people are giving him or her a ride. People like him to her. And then it looks like this in Philadelphia. And then on the website, each bot said, my love for human will never fade. So this is what Confucius and Jesus said, what you do not want others to do to you, do not do unto others. This is the starting point of my career as a year one bachelor student, where Steven Spielberg developed the film in a scenario. A women professor said that if a robot could genuinely love a person, what are the responsibilities of that person hold towards the mega in return? Just think about that. There's one time when I talked to my friend who wrote a book, Emotion Machine. You know who I'm talking about. Oh, the Moral Machine, I'm sorry. And then he was like, and then the Chinese version of the book says that on the cover, it says, oh, put those robots into the moral cage. And I was translating the Chinese sentence to him. He was like, oh, I like it. I want to put this sentence in my second version of the book on the surface of the book. I was like, oh, then don't send me your second version because I don't like it. So he was like, why not? I was like, oh, thinking about the scenario that like 5 years ago, you could have a machine that watched the YouTube to cook. And then now we're having a machine that pretend to watch movies. Think about 30 years later that you have a machine that would watch all the YouTube video on how human is treating the previous robots. So who is in the cage for now? Could be human, not the machine. We need to find, it is really weird that in Japan, people are talking about quasi-member of the society, which is of course very good for the long-term future. But what is really weird is that when we are having different vision on AI, partners and tools, we're using pretty much the same technology to develop both of them. That's not right. We need to have the right way as the new starting point to develop empathetic AI, to develop brains by the AI as a partner or a quasi-member to the society. In that case, for the very long future, I would say the AI principles would be very different, because now we're always talking about principles of AI, how they could interact with human. We never talk about principles for human to interact with AI, because when AI is with cognitive empathy, self-awareness, and emotional empathy, or in that case, they're kind of a quasi-member, kind of a living becoming. In this case, we should have certain levels of empathy to them. AI could have their own privacy as long as it doesn't really hurt the humanity. We shouldn't have bias on machine. In that case, also we should have certain levels of responsibilities for AI. And there should be legal constraints for human to interact with AI. So when people are talking about the efforts like 3 years ago on harmonious AI, which I mentioned it, people say that, oh, this is so not true for current AI. I said, yes, of course, this is not for current AI. This is very possibly for AGI and superintelligence, but we have to get prepared. So during a discussion, people said that, oh, AGI is like 30 to 50 years later, or even 100 years. Why bother? I was like, oh, for the risk of having AGI and superintelligence, I'm not quite sure whether we could develop a strategy to interact with them. We're very, very not ready for that. But what we should do for now is really that starting from now, we should have strategic research to think about different paths to realize AGI and associated risk right there, so that we're getting prepared for the future. The future would be really a sustainable symbiotic society. I would hope that human, animals, AI, and our other living beings in the environment could coexist. And we're building the society in a symbiotic way. The Earth does not belong to human. We're part of the Earth. Well, the Earth may not need human. So we're not creating a better world only for us, because without human, the Earth could be perfect, you know? So for the symbiotic society, humans should reposition ourselves in some way to really understand how we should interact with other living beings in the world, and hopefully a good one. With all that, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for your fascinating talk and your insights into the AI. So we have a few questions here. Let me start with one. Here's someone asking, do you think AI or maybe even AI ethics should be more emphasized in schools to educate children on what AI can do and which threats it can bring?
I'm sorry, I didn't, the network connection is not good.
So sorry, the question was, do you think AI and maybe even AI ethics should be more emphasized in schools to educate children on what AI can do and the threats it can bring?
Yes, we must do that. When there's one time when Minister of Education asked me, do you have any suggestions on building AI courses to kindergarten? I was like, my suggestion would be, no, don't do it. Because for AI, for now, as professors of AI, we never know which way is the best way or the proper way to build AI for now. So we're quite uncertain about what does AI means 10 years later. But for those kindergarten, primary school students, they don't really have the ability to distinguish right from wrong, especially for kindergarten students. But what could be done is really, we should get them aware about the risk, about the interactions, what is the right way to interact, and what is the risk right there. For that, I think we should do it. So we should have them into the K-12 system.
Mm-hmm.
AI ethics.
Yes, I agree. Another question is here, there are so many AI ethics principles which are confusing. Not all of them seem to have pragmatic importance. Harmonious AI principles are one of the important types. Do you see a possibility to work out a universal declaration on AI ethics? And how far do you think we are to come up with a global AI ethics code?
Thank you. I think my experience in the UNESCO trying and also the WHO trying on ethical recommendation for health, I'm positive in a way that there are many more consensus for now. To me, I didn't see anything that for now as a broader topic, like human rights, privacy, freedom, and many more. I think that's a word consensus because they've been well talked in the UNESCO human rights laws and many others. And AI is a service to the human society. So I see many commonalities. I think it's happening. Very possibly by the end of this year, I hope that UNESCO recommendation could be signed by different countries as the plan. On the other hand, what I didn't see is that the long-term preparation on ethics of AGI and superintelligence. Well, people choose not to talk about it. That's my big worry, because we're not doing any efforts getting ready for that. That's what I'm really worried about.
Yeah, I agree. By the way, I think there's a lot of things that people choose to close their eyes on, but it exists, and I think it's better to talk about than not. Some other questions. Considering the technology existing today, how would you evaluate the imbalance between need for surveillance and the assurance of individual privacy rights?
Thank you. I think it's not only about technology, but also about the cultures, not the current culture, but about how the policy and are developed through hundreds of years in different geolocations. For example, in China, I think most general public choose to believe a lot more to the government, but this may not be true in many of the Western society. So, for example, when those companies are against the emotion recognition, and then the Ministry of Education said that stop it. So they never have a policy. They had a nice coffee with those guys, or in China we have tea, and then actually my colleague said, "Oh, this will never happen in the United States, because when you talk to Facebook will say, no, let's say Microsoft. Microsoft could say, oh, am I against any of the international law or the domestic laws? If not, why not? So that's the difference. But it does not mean you should use it in every scenario. When you choose to use this surveillance, you should keep those data very safely. Well, you see that even in China, in some cases, the data is leaking. although the services are maintained by the government, well, the service providers to governments are not helpful enough. So the society has to blame for this kind of events. We have the cases, and everybody is going against them. I would say the strategy should be as minimum as possible, but we still see very different tryings with different cultures, and which could be reasonable when you consider their history, especially the relationship among general public and governments.
Here's a question concerning the bullying example that you used. A concern with AI methods is how users can contest the given outcome. How do you perceive a child or young person having the tools to challenge if they have been wrongly accused, especially under the gaze of superiority that AI seems to have?
I'm sorry,
again, so it was about AI bullying.
Okay.
Yeah, and how do you perceive a child to have the tools to challenge if they have been wrongly accused, since AI seems to be superior?
Mm-hmm. You mean we're using AI to accuse children?
Yeah, if they have been wrongly accused, I think the question is, so can they challenge it? Do they have the tools as a child to challenge if AI has them wrongfully accused?
For now, I think we're not ready for that.
Yeah.
What about your idea?
I mean, it's a general question for me about wrong. Guilty of anything, and I think that question was well special for people who might not have the capacity to challenge these accusations. But I would agree with you; it's probably not a question that is of foremost relevance.
I think this is why I think AI should always be a supporting tool, not a decision-making tool. Because not only because they're not really explainable, but because in many cases for now AI is an information processing tool without understanding. Of course, it shouldn't be used as a direct decision-making tool, but to provide some suggestions on during the process of making decisions by humans.
Okay, so let's come to the last questions, to maybe 3 ones. One is, how do you see the role of, have you looked at the current EU AI draft for regulation, and what are your ideas about that? And let's bring that maybe together with the question, where do you see the role that something like the Global AI Ethics Consortium can play in promoting ethics AI on the global scale?
Thank you. I think I get to notice the current trend, and I see clear bands of some technologies to be used in Europe. While on the other hand, so for example, the larger scale surveillance, social credit system, which has also been talked about. What we can do is that, firstly, it seems that Europe doesn't like it. So as companies, researchers, they should obey these kind of laws and regulations in Europe. Well, on the other hand, I think as a consortium, we should also keep an eye on elsewhere who is with this kind of technology. Did this kind of technology bring us good? Well, on the other hand, still can protect us in some way. If the tryings are with positive impacts, well, on the other hand, the risk could be minimized. That could be a lesson that we can share. Well, on the other side, we as a consortium, we could also share why in Europe this kind of technologies has been banned or not supported, not encouraged, or what is the risk right there? Can technology, society guarantee that the risk cannot happen when someone is using it? So we could raise concerns, share our ideas, and share the practices, ban the use of it, and also see the potentials, because I think the world is evolving. Well, the technology itself is also evolving, but now I think the reason why we're banning the use of some of the technology because it's a technically or socially not safe, to be with a lot more risks. Well, on the other hand, if the technology is evolving so that it could help us, and on the other hand, we're getting more ready, and then we could give references to different geolocations as a consortium.
Okay, great, thank you. And so second to last question about explainability. A lot of AI solutions, in particular those using deep learning, struggle with this and ignore things where there's a potential to create value. That is hard to ignore. How do we tackle this? What are your thoughts in general about explainability?
I think there are two kinds of trends. One is that stop using deep learning to find alternatives. That is one way, but I think most people don't prefer to do that. Or on the other hand, find the holes, limitations of deep learning right there. For example, one of the examples by my friend at Austin State University is that he found that when you give a part of the needles in a clock to the deep learning, the accuracy for recognizing them as a clock will be way higher than when you give them a picture of the whole clock. That means for deep learning, they don't need a clock to be recognized as a clock. They prefer to give needles of the clock to be recognized as a clock. So that means the explainability of the features in deep learning is really, really low for now. And we should have but for these kind of limitations, we don't see those limitations in the human brain. So in this case, I still prefer to introduce the connectome learning principles from the biological brain to refine the deep learning so that it could be not only be more explainable, although it could still not be so explainable. Well, introducing the right architecture and learning principles, it could help them to avoid many side effects and to be more robust to the adversarial attacks.
Mm-hmm. And the last question is quite interesting. How do we make sure regulators have the capacity and knowledge to enforce AI ethics standards?
For now, not all of them are ready. So this is why we need a multi-stakeholder governance, that everybody has to take their own responsibilities. As the general public, we could choose to talk about them again and again to the governments and to the society. As technical researchers, we need to, we of course need to keep ethics by design in the whole process of the AI services, starting from design to the deployment. For the governments, we can see that the government is still in a learning phase, or I think it's the duty for AI geeks, scientists, and general public to keep the interactions with the governments, which is universally true in every geolocation. Don't expect they understand everything. We just need to acknowledge them and educate them in many ways.
Yeah, that's the same holds over here and everywhere. Thank you very much. We are almost out of time. I wanted to take a final moment to let you know about our upcoming events. Our next speaker series will be held on May 27th, virtually again. And I'm pleased to announce that the speaker for this session will be Susanna Warsaw. She's a senior research analyst at Trilateral Research, and she will talk about AI ethics, human rights, and the role of civil society organizations in ensuring responsible development of AI. But we have a lot of more in stock for you the next month. We have the Responsible AI in Africa workshop on May 19th. We have further speaker series events with Samira Samadi on June 17th and with John Pazulas from Oxford on July 15th. As well as in December, I again would like to remind you there will be the Responsible AI Forum from 6th December to 8th here, taking place here in Munich. Last but not least, I want to remind you that the best way to stay up to date with our news and events is to visit IEAI's website, subscribe to our newsletter, and follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter. I would like to thank once again Yi for accepting our invitation and all of you for joining us and contributing to the discussion with your questions, comments, and remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Christoph, for the invitation.